Hey everyone, good morning and welcome to Freedom Harvest Farms. Clearly it's raining, and so today is going to be a little bit different than it normally is, because you guys know that I'm normally out in the gardens and I'm walking around in the gardens, but you also know that I'm usually out with a camera person on the other side. You probably have heard, or if you haven't heard, I lost my camera guy over the last couple of weeks. Things have just changed in my life, and that's okay, and I'm moving forward. But because of the rain today, I just figured, what the heck, I'll just hang out, and I'll take care of the camera work for myself. And next week, I have my friend Katie that's going to come out and join me, and she's going to do the camera work for me over there. But past that, we are getting a glorious amount of rain. We've already gotten an inch of rain this morning. This is really good because our ponds had started to get dry. You guys can see, let me show you over here, the neighbor's pond. You can see it's getting a little bit of water in it. Look, the chickens are like, you have food for us? Surely you got something for us. Their pond is actually getting a little bit of water. It was completely bone dry. And then our pond, which you can't see from where I am, but our pond actually has the water in it, and it's getting some more water in it now. So that's really good. It had gotten dry. We have there's a bar in between the back part of the tank and the front part of the tank, and when you can see that bar, you can actually see that the tank is really low. So we got the tank filled up in, let's see, September of this last year. This is at the end of 2022. September is when the tank actually filled up, and that was right after it had gone bone dry during the drought last year. And so my dad got some work done on the tank, and right about that time we got that September flood, and it got filled back up again. So it's been going down. It hasn't been without rain, but it has been low. And so this is really nice to have already gotten an inch. We may even get up to 3 inches of rain. I was out at 7:30 a.m. this morning harvesting squash and onions, trying to get those out of the ground because I wanted to make sure that I could get those before the rain. So the rain is super exciting, and I'm very happy to have that available for us, and it's going to be great for my gardens to have a little bit of rain on them. I hope it doesn't get to be too much, because this time of year with all that, yes, exactly, yay, rain. All those broadleaves that I have, the tomatoes, the eggplants, the green beans, although we don't want to get too much rain on that stuff. The melons that are starting to grow, the big pumpkin squash that are starting to grow, we don't want to get too much rain on that. All right, so if you're following along here, be sure to share this with your friends and let them know that I'm still doing these lives every Sunday morning. I'm now into 4 years of doing these lives every Sunday morning. They're a great joy, and I'll continue to keep doing them, even if I have to hold the camera by myself some weeks. But I know I've got lots of friends that are going to be willing to help out, and of course my family here at the farm is willing to help out with that as well. It's just that it was a rainy day, and so it made more sense for me to just take care of it myself today. If you're following me on YouTube, or if you're here watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do that, because that's helpful to me. Even if you're just here a live watcher on Facebook, please just go over to YouTube and subscribe to my channel. I also still have the podcast going, Dinner Table Talks. Last week I had my friend Jennifer that actually held the camera here on the live for me. She was on the podcast with me. This week coming up, I have my friends Kristen Knowlton and Sean Sutherland, and they're going to talk about special diets, and we have a lot of updates with nutrient-dense food and things like that. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So the podcast is still going on. Things are still happening around here at the farm, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Now, over the last 5 weeks, we have been discussing regenerative agriculture. I had mentioned a few weeks ago that I had gone to the Rockport Farmers Market and had talked about how I was an organic and regenerative agricultural farmer, and I realized that a lot of people didn't really know what that meant. And so I started thinking, let me do a series on here about what is regenerative agriculture and what are the 5 principles of regenerative agriculture. So over the last 4 weeks, we've gone through the 5 principles there. They're up in the comment section. I'll put them down in the comment section, but they're in the post at the top. We talked about armoring your soil. We talked about biodiversity. We talked about creating cover crops and always having live plants and live roots in your gardens or in your farm or in your fields or in your pastures. And then last week we talked about integrating livestock. I showed you how my chickens are integrated into my gardens. You can go back. If you're here on YouTube, you can go back. Or if you want to go to YouTube and check it out, those are all up. They're very easy to find. They're on a playlist there. Or you can just go back through my Facebook feed here and you'll be able to find last week's live. Now this week what we're talking about is actually a well-known topic that a lot of people talk about, and that is minimizing the soil disturbance. Now, a lot of people will call that no-till, and I do a lot of that, and I can't show you this week what I've done, but I talk about it week after week about how I leave my gardens in permanent structure all of the time. And then I build a new garden every year, and then that year, that garden has the time to develop and get into a more permanent structure, and then it gets healthier and healthier every season. The best way to describe this is, and I like to always reiterate with all of my coaching clients, with anybody that I'm teaching here out at the farm, when I'm doing any of my organic gardening classes or anything like that, we have to understand that the earth is alive, that plants and soil and everything that exists here is actually alive, and is integrated, right? And so the soil is alive. How is it alive? It's got lots and lots of microscopic creatures and other types of life living in it. The mycelium is the fungus, the mushrooms that grow in the soil, that eat on the carbon, that eat on the mulch, and then of course there's earthworms, there's all different types of microbiotics going on in the soil. So the soil is actually alive if you give it the things it needs to be alive. One of those, and of course that's what regenerative agriculture, the 5 principles, that's what we're doing, is we're talking about keeping the soil alive and keeping the soil healthy. If the soil is healthy and alive, then it can maintain healthy plants and it can grow nutrient-dense food, and then it helps us out as well. And so now talking about the disturbance of the soil, it's like saying that it's okay to just continually keep, we down here on the south and the coast, we have hurricanes down here, right? And so imagine if we lived in a world where every time a hurricane blew through, it just tore everything up, and we'd just be like, oh well, no big deal, we'll just rebuild it and just start all over again. Well, eventually we can understand that there's no sustainability in that. You can't just keep putting something in a place and then letting it be destroyed every year or every 6 months, or and in garden situations or in farming situations every 6 months, maybe even every week or so if you're tilling up in between your footpaths and all of that kind of stuff. So you're basically blowing through the soil life with a hurricane every single time. All of that stuff is interconnected. I'm going to put this down for a minute because I want to be able to show you with my hands. All of what's happening under the ground is interconnected. There's an interconnected web of roots. There's an interconnected web of mycelium. There's an interconnected web of, and it's the infrastructure of the soil. And so imagine a hurricane blowing through and blowing up all your banks, your road systems, your power lines, anything that actually provides the things that you need to you to be able to live your life, right? This is exactly what happens every single time we disturb the soil. That's why we are needing to minimize the soil disturbance, because the plants, that is how the plants access the nutrients that they need, right? And if we just constantly tear it up and then we just pay to put the nutrients in ourselves, which is what's happening with industrial agriculture, there is an issue where we will get to a point, and we are getting to and have already gotten to that point, where it becomes non-sustainable. Just like a hurricane blowing through and knocking all the houses off the coast, and then us just going, oh, we're just going to rebuild it. And we're just going to rebuild it. Eventually, you're going to stop rebuilding in that area because it keeps getting blown up, right? So this is just common sense, okay? The challenging part that makes it hard for not common sense, where we've been shifted to think about things differently, is we have been taught to look at our gardens and things in a very certain way, that it has to look really pretty, that this is what it looks like. When it's clean, this is what it looks like. We've also been trained that there's no way to get good soil unless you tear up the soil underneath. Well, 9 times out of 10, especially if you're in a piece of property that has just recently been flipped from, or within the last 50 years, has been flipped from cotton field into suburbia or suburban homes, you don't really have any topsoil there. The only place you might find topsoil even around in our region is that you're going to find topsoil over in places like Ranzas Pass is a really good example. Some of the places in Flower Bluff, any place where there's not been farm fields for a very long time and there's been a lot of tree growth and different types of plant growth, that's the kind of stuff you're looking for that's going to have some topsoil. And you might do an initial disturbance. So when I build a garden, when I build a brand new garden, the first thing I do is I actually do till up a little bit of that topsoil on top, right? But then that's not the soil that I use to grow in, and that's the last time I till it. I don't go in and till it every season. I don't till up on my footpaths. It just gets replanted every season. But the way that I'm able to do that, where I have soil that's soft enough to work with, where I actually have some healthy soil and I'm beginning to regenerate the healthy soil on top of that, is that I bring soil in. I bring in materials. I bring in carbon, the mulch. I bring in composted materials. I bring in cow manure compost. I bring in some topsoil that I found from somewhere that is actually decent. I bring in some sand, and I actually raise up and create a raised garden, and that's what I plant into, right? So then I'm not having to till every season. And the only time past that there's any soil disturbance that is occurring is whenever I'm actually doing a little bit of weeding. And if it's a large plant, and I've showed you guys this in the past week's series when I've talked about leaving the plants in the ground, if you have a large plant like say a sunflower or a roselle or an okra, I just cut the stalk off and leave the root base in the ground. I'm not ripping stuff out of my garden. Now, if I'm doing small weeding, I am going ahead and just kind of popping that stuff out, but then I'm going ahead and planting it back in. I'm not tilling my rows to go through and plant. I'm not pulling out all the weeds. I'm hand going through and taking care of all of that. Now, it takes some, there's some efficiency, or there's some lack of efficiency when you first get started doing that. But once you've given the investment to no tilling, the soil begins to regenerate itself, and it has the ability to maintain in a way that it keeps your plants healthier, it keeps your soil alive, so these are the things we've been talking about each one of these weeks, all 5 weeks of the Regenerative Agriculture series, where we've been talking about all the different phases of why it's so important to leave the plants in place, right? But just to simply understand the idea of breaking up that soil causes a full-blown disturbance of life, right? And we can't keep sustainably living if we have a full-blown disturbance of life every time, right? And there's so many things that I've talked about over the weeks about when we have these heavy rains and we have a flooding of rain, or we have a drought, where we can maintain moisture in the soil because our soil hasn't been ripped up and then dried out. If you've ever worked on your garden before, you know, or when you work on your garden, you know that every time you turn up your soil or even do any weeding, as soon as the sun comes in, it dries out everything on the top, where you actually might have had some moisture and some good moisture in your soil. You actually see that it gets really dried out. Well, the sun dries it out, the wind rips it up, right? So these are the types of things that are happening in our large scale fields. But what they're doing in order to keep that going is that they're just contributing more money to it. They're doing more work. They're contributing more money. And it seems like, because it's large scale, that they're sustainable and there's an efficiency to it. But that's only because we're talking about doing 10,000 acres at a time. Whereas I can go to do, one small garden and produce more than enough food for my family. And so each one of us has the ability to do that same thing. And we're not having to do the backbreaking labor of tearing up the soil every time. Now, I'm going to say it. There's a generation that loves to till the soil because it's just a drive the tractor and there. I got to admit, when I tear up the soil the very first time I do it, oh my God, it's beautiful. It smells so good, but it's alive, right? When you first tear it up, anything that's been alive in there, it's alive. So yes, it does feel good, right? And you do get those microbiotics underneath your fingernail, and you get the good vibration of the mental wellness of digging in the soil. That's all good stuff, right? But the problem is it doesn't maintain. It can't sustain once it keeps being torn up over and over and over again. So you have to stop tearing it up over and over again. And the best way to get a good
annual year of tearing up the soil and building and doing all of that is to build yourself a new garden every year. And that's why I talk about, no matter if you're talking about small space gardening or you're doing small raised beds, or whether you're doing larger homestead gardening like what I do, take it one bite of the elephant at a time, right? One bite of the elephant says, I'm going to tear this bed up this season, and then I'm going to let it get its infrastructure again. I'm going to help it get its infrastructure. I'm going to plant the seeds. I'm going to plant the plants. I'm going to plant new flowers. I'm going to put some perennials up for hedgerowing. I'm going to do all of this stuff to get this garden really healthy and it well in place. And then next year, I'm going to do another small bed. And then eventually you take over all over the place with all of these nice small beds, but you're not having to re-till and restart every 6 months. Some nice lightning. Every time you re-till and restart, you have to regain the investment with that piece of land, the health and wellness that existed on that land. So if you guys have any questions about that, please feel free to ask me about it. It's kind of, at this point, no-till is kind of industry kind of wording and understanding. There's a lot of things I often will hear people as I would go and do agricultural conferences and things like that. Back when I was the executive director of Grow Local South Texas, I would go to conferences and speak at things like that. And I would hear a lot about this, like Ray Archuleta. I actually got to hear him speak live. I've heard Gabe Brown speak live. I've heard some of the most amazing speakers that speak specifically about regenerative agriculture speak and explain, and they oftentimes will come to Texas, and there's a lot of, well, we have so much clay, we have so, there's a lot of pushback from the idea that no-till won't work here. One of the other main reasons why a lot of people say no-till won't work here is because we don't really have the hard freeze seasons. But the thing about it is that that's taking the information that we're receiving with understanding regenerative agriculture and applying it to industrial large-scale production. And what we're doing now is beginning to teach people you can't take an apple and make it an orange. So you have to let an apple turn into applesauce, and you have to let an orange become orange juice, right? You can't expect two things that are completely different in nature to be anything ever alike. You have to adapt what it is into what you want it to be. And so that's what we have to do with regenerative agriculture. And we can do that on a large scale, but we have to do it from the principles and the foundation of regenerative to begin with, not the principles and the foundation of industrial, even organic. That's part of the reason why a lot of the farmers don't participate in USDA certified organic anymore. I won't get USDA certified organic. And a lot of the farmers that help to start the certification for USDA certification for organic are actually not participating in organic anymore. And it's not that they're not doing organic methods like I am doing. We're doing 100% organic methods. The thing about it is that it's not really an organic method if you're having to use industrial methods, and you can't really do good organic gardening if you're trying to also do no-till and you're doing it all in the industrial way, right? And so there's lots and lots of shifting that is occurring with that in the small-scale agricultural world, but also in large scale. I noticed that one of my friends sent me a very well-known brand of basmati rice that actually says regenerative agriculture on top of it. Comes from regenerative farming. I also know that GM Foods, I think it's called, they have actually contracted Gabe Brown to help them get their regenerative agriculture underway. So there is a movement towards doing some of this on a broader, larger scale and learning how we can create some sustainability in this. I do wonder anytime the larger scale branding starts to take on words like regenerative agriculture, when it will actually be stolen and stripped from the actual regenerative way that we do things down here, or the way that we're trying to do things, or I'm trying to do things here at Freedom Harvest Farms in Taft, right? All right. That's really all I have to talk about because I don't have a lot to show you guys today. I don't want to sit here and just be mouthy for too long. So hopefully that gives you a lot of information. If you have any specific questions, please just drop them down in the comments. Like I said, if you're on my YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, ask me some comments. I'd love to get into more conversation with you about this. Please don't forget that the podcast will go live. The launch will go out tomorrow on Monday. And again, I have some friends at the dinner table, so the podcast is still going on. I also, this is very important, October the 29th, Why do I keep saying October the 29th? I do that all the time for some reason. April the 29th, that's next Saturday, I'm doing an organic and regenerative farming class here. Not farming, but organic gardening class here on the farm. It's from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and it's $44 a car load. So bring a car full of people. You got fill your car up with up to 7 people and come out here to the farm. We will do an educational tour. You will get the Ask Me Anything. We can actually dig in and we can have a really good in-depth conversation. I'll tell you that those classes have been fairly small, so you could end up with a private conversation with me. There may be some other people that show up. Hopefully there'll be a nice turnout for the class. Share this with your friends. Let your friends know about the gardening class. Invite them to come out. Also know that I do all kinds of landscaping, edible landscaping, productive landscaping, gardening, container gardening help. I do all kinds of coaching help. I do homestead consultations. I do a lot of work with that kind of stuff. And I'm also doing a lot more food-based and wellness coaching as well. So if you're interested in my Food is Medicine coaching courses, I'm doing those and my hands-on coaching opportunities right now in a special through the end of May. It's basically $35 an hour. I'm doing 2 hours for $77. That helps to save me the gas money if I just drive to your property and we spend 2 hours doing some work. But there's some ways that we can work that out. I've had some other people work with me for 4 hours, where we spend the first hour in consultation and the second 3 hours, or the next time I get together, we spend 3 hours actually working and purchasing the products and doing all the things that we need to do with that. I'm very easy to get a hold of, especially now because I have a lot more free time. But I'm really enjoying my life. I'm enjoying the freedom, and I'm facing the day-to-day of the newness that has come with being a single farmer in Texas, a single woman farmer in Texas. Alrighty, I love you, friends, and I hope that you have the best Sunday ever. I'm looking forward to getting back to my yoga chapel this afternoon. I go to First United Methodist Church Yoga Chapel. If you guys ever want to do yoga, that's a great place to do it, and it's amazing. So come and meet up with me over there. Come to the farm on Monday. You guys know that I do open farms on Monday with the garden healing. And if you need to get in touch with me, just reach out to me. And thank you so much for your support. I love you. Have the best week ever, and thank God for all this rain. I'll see you all very soon. I'm going to flip this around so you guys can see some of that rain some more. Look at the water standing way back there. You see it? All right. I love you. See you soon.